Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you with us today for episode 32 of Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers. And today's kind of a fun conversation. I'm beaming down through, I think, our guest's television system today to talk to a new member of the Tennessee Bar. And Tennessee is not a jurisdiction that we have state materials for. So our guest today actually used our course for the multi-state and the performance tests, and I'm really excited, and he passed in July 2016, and so I want to welcome Bill Hyde. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Jackson, how are you?
I'm well. Congratulations. Got to be feeling great today, right?
Feeling more than great.
Yeah.
Better than I deserve.
Yeah. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your background and how you came to be in a position to be sitting for the July Tennessee Bar?
Well, let's say a little bit about my background. I took the test 4 times and passed on the 4th time. But I work for a food distributor. I'm a financial analyst. And don't adjust your lighting. That really is gray hair you see. So, I came up on law school when I was 42. I had a health scare and decided I wasn't getting any younger and decided that was on my bucket list and I better mark it off while I had the opportunity. But I've also got an MBA and I've also got an undergrad degree in finance. So I enjoy school, I enjoy learning, and never really failed anything up until the Tennessee bar examiners decided to teach me what that was like.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But I'm married. I've got 2 teenagers, which that was part of the challenge, and a demanding job. I work 10, 12 hours a day, and doing that and law school and studying for the bar it wasn't exactly fun, but it was interesting.
Yeah, and it's really a great accomplishment. But when you first came to me, you went through our webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam, your last bar exam. And during the webinar, one of the things I remember, I've obviously done this with thousands of people, but you stood out to me because you typed in the chat box somewhere during that thing, the system is rigged, or something to that effect. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah. And then you wrote me a really good email afterwards explaining why you thought the system was rigged, because you kept falling just short and your scores seemed to be like hovering around a particular number. And you also shared with me in that message your success that you'd had, your MBA, I think you finished in the top 10 in your law school class. Am I right about that?
I did.
Yeah. And so you're not stupid.
Right. I know how to take tests. Or at least I thought I did.
Yeah.
But I needed your help with this particular test, and I didn't realize that until we were about a good few weeks into the program. I realized, wow, I really needed this guy's help from the beginning.
And why do you say that? I really appreciate it. Why do you say that?
Well, I was relying on a big box program, and I went to a night school, because I had to work. And the big box program, I didn't realize it until it was too late, but it didn't work for me because their schedule was the same whether you worked or did not work. And what I was finding was I couldn't keep up with their schedule, and it was leaving me exhausted, frustrated, and I was going into each exam just completely frazzled. And I didn't realize until I got some of your coaching that I really needed to change the pace of how I was absorbing the material. I needed to quit memorizing, which was, I finally made a believer out of me. And that was probably one of the bigger shifts, and that and the pace of the program.
Well, let's break that down a little bit, because the memorization thing is a big thing for people. So you'd taken the exam previous times, and you'd spent a lot of time memorizing and reciting the rules back, and you were hitting sort of that ceiling where you just couldn't get past. And so one of the things I said to you was I didn't want you to memorize. I wanted you to actually learn the law, know it, and then be intuitive about the way you answered. And I won't say you were resistant. You were intelligently skeptical about it. Is that a fair way of putting it?
I'd say that's fair. I wasn't skeptical. I was hesitant because it was such a big shift. And each time I had taken it, I took it 3 times before I passed. And each time I had taken it, I'd only fallen 2, 3, or 4 points short. The most I'd ever fallen short was 4 points. And so in my mind, I was going, okay, I just need to memorize a little bit more and study just a little bit harder and come up with a few more mnemonics, and then maybe I can close the gap. And it never occurred to me that the whole memorizing thing was part of the problem. And until you kind of rocked my world a little bit and said, Bill, just know the material. If you walk into it and you know the material, you don't have to memorize anything. And I loved it. That, along with the change of pace, was exactly what I needed.
Yeah, I remember early on you sent me an email, may have been the same one. You said, well, so here's the problem. My wife likes The Walking Dead. I think that was the show. Am I right? Yeah. And she wants me to watch The Walking Dead, and I got to study. I got all these hours, and and I'm not trying to throw your wife under the bus by any means here, but she was not being terribly supportive about this whole idea, right? I mean,
no, not at all.
Okay.
She was for this to the end.
Yeah. Okay. So she's probably pretty happy now, but at that point, part of the challenge that you were facing, and I think it's consistent for a lot of people, is it felt like to get those last points, you had to do exactly what you said. If I just memorize some more, if I learn some more mnemonics, if I can recite some more, I'm going to win. And yet, here we were telling you counterintuitively, don't do that. Just keep working through doing the lectures, the questions, and then some time, and then more questions, what we call spaced or step repetition, that you actually end up studying a little bit less, but knowing the material more, right?
It helped me use my time more effectively. And the hour, it's exactly what you just said. I wasn't studying as much, but my study time was more productive. When I finished, I felt like I knew the subject better than when I was using the other materials and just trying to cram in letters and silly sayings and whatnot. So it really was helpful. And I will say this, you may not know this, but about a week or two into using your materials, one of my instructors at school made an offhand comment. He was looking at my scores, and he said, Bill, for you, it's all about the MBE. He said, you need to, you know the state topics. And he said, just don't worry about that. He said, you got to practice on the MPT, but you got to quit aiming for the average on the MBE, which is what our big box people had told us to do. Aim for the state average. He said, you really need to blow that out of the water. And that's when I knew. I was like, okay, I got to change the way I'm thinking. And you really did help with that.
Yeah. And I think it's to your credit that you avoided what I call the stinky diaper approach. It's smelly and warm, but at least it's mine. I mean, you were willing to get out of the stinky diapers and say, okay, this is uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. But I'm going to try that. I'm going to do it. And I think that once you got that in your head, that you were going to take that approach, then we could start to talk about pacing, that other second thing that you talked about, because you're right. A traditional big box bar review would say everyone studies the same subject on the same day at the same time. And with this approach, you were able to study when it fit into your schedule and know how it fit in. And having a family, having a full-time job, and studying for the bar, how did you balance all of that? I mean, because it is a challenge, isn't it?
It is. And the way I handled it was very simple. I kept a calendar, and I mapped out 2 weeks at a time. And I would look at your schedule first. I would figure out when my wife wanted some honeydew time, when I was going to get a honeydew list. And I tried to mesh the two together so that Jackson got his time and my wife got her time. And while I was studying, those were the priorities. Jackson's time came first, which I'm not going to tell her that.
Yeah, but, I'm not sure you're going to want her to watch this video.
Okay, but over those weeks, I would mesh the two together. I would map out when I needed to work, when I needed to come in work early, when I needed to stay late. My employer was great for letting me study here where it's nice and quiet. And so very simply, just keeping up with a detailed planner was a big help for me in staying on track. And then there were times when you and I would talk, and I would kind of say, well, okay, well, here's where I'm at. And you'd say, okay, we need to kind of hit the pedal a little bit. And there were even times when you said, okay, you might want to slow down a little bit, which that just blew me away because I've never had anyone who tried to help me with the bar ever tell me, you might want to slow down a little bit. And that's when I knew, okay, he really is trying to help me. He understands that I need to stay balanced and go into the exam, calm and cool and collected, and most importantly, not angry. That was the first emotion that you helped me get rid of. But yeah, that level of planning was essential.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between watching The Walking Dead and being The Walking Dead, right?
And that's what it felt like. I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
It really did feel like I was walking around, without a brain in my head.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that struck me is that you're clearly capable, but terribly frustrated, and sort of channeling that frustration and anger, and I think that's a legitimate response to what had happened, to something that was more productive, that you could start to see some results and start to see and build some confidence, which is what I think started to happen. And to be able to kind of pull you back a little bit and say, you know what, you're okay, you're doing fine. You don't have to brute force your way through this. It's not more force. Sometimes it's less that gives you the better result. And you took that instruction really well. A lot of times people struggle with that because the presumption, I think, is I got to do more, right? You heard that voice in your brain saying, do more, right?
I did, and I was very thankful when you would say, "Hey, you need to relax. You're on track," and that was helpful, and it really did help me a lot.
Yeah. What was it like? I get this question sometimes from people when they're thinking about our course for the multi-state and they're in a jurisdiction like Tennessee where we don't offer state materials. How difficult was it for you to integrate what you were doing on the state part of your study with the multi-state and the performance test study?
It wasn't too hard. I focused on the MBE the most, and I focused on that in the beginning so that I would make sure that I could master those 7 topics. And between you and my instructor friend at school, both saying, you've got to master these 7 topics. I knew right away I needed to focus on that material. But starting about 3 weeks out, maybe 3.5 weeks out from the exam, I started weaving in the Tennessee topics just as a reminder. Once again, not doing the mnemonics, not doing the memorizing, but just refreshing, like going through my outlines and just refreshing the topic in my head. But then I would quickly go back to the MBE topics because I wanted those to be first and foremost. And it's like my instructor friend said at my school. He said, if you blow the MBE out of the water, your essays and the MPT will fall in line. And sure enough, I feel like that's exactly what I did. I know I blew the MBE out of the water this time.
Yeah. You had really great practice MBE scores, and I know that was part of my reason for feeling like you would pass. And I know you were kind of like, really, you think I'm going to pass? Yeah, I do. Actually, I do, Bill. So, there you go. Karnak, folks, I can call him. So you went to the exam, 4th time. Was it different for you emotionally walking in this time than the other times?
It was. I was much more relaxed this time. I wasn't as angry. Mm-hmm. And that helped a lot because the other, after I failed the first time, the second and third time, I went in with, frankly, a little chip on my shoulder because I was like, okay, how am I going to get through this rigged system? Yeah. And but the 4th time I went in, my sister had made me a shirt that said "No test is impossible," and
nice.
I know it was. I should have worn it today.
You should have. Yeah. What's wrong with you?
But yeah, it was great. I got a lot of comments on it from the bar exam. The examiners, they loved it, and so it was more light. And I went in, and probably the biggest The biggest challenge was another thing that you taught me, which was don't torture yourself over the question. Read the question, make a choice, move on with your life,
Yeah.
and trust your answer. And that was also a really big shift for me because that's not really how I was taught. It was like go through, look for the distractors, try to figure out which, exactly. And your approach was no, go with your gut. You know the material, go with it, and then move on. I finished with a little time left, which was nice, and I left feeling pretty good about it. I was a little nervous because there was an essay that I knew I didn't do well on, but apparently I didn't do too
You
bad.
did okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I want to just quickly, just for those who don't understand exactly what Bill was talking about with the intuitive approach, what we say is that you should read a question and the answer choices carefully, and then you should make an instant decision. You don't want to go through all of that analysis and distractors and narrowing down and so on. And it feels awkward at first, doesn't it, to answer the
Yeah.
questions that way. But as you were going through and doing questions and in practice doing the questions, you saw your practice scores going through the roof, didn't you?
By 10%.
Yeah.
I mean, it really launched my scores when I started just trusting my instincts and going with it.
Yeah.
I really didn't know.
I'm sorry, the other key part to this, I think, in your experience was that you did it in practice, so it wasn't for the first time ever on the bar exam you were trying it, right?
Oh yeah, there was no way I would have. I mean, I'm skeptical. I'm an analyst. I don't like to see proof before I implement something, and I did. There were plenty of practice questions in the material, and I saw my scores go up even in property. So, and that's my Achilles heel.
Me
You
too.
know, and I know you hate it when I say, "Oh, well, that's the topic I don't like the most," but I figured that if my property scores could go up, there's something to this, and sure enough, there was.
Yeah, it's cool. Now, then you're done with the exam, you're in that waiting period. And of course, I think sometimes it's easier to wait when you've got a job and a family and other things going on, right? Life goes on.
It is. It's not like I'm waiting to hang out my own shingle or something like that. I have a nice job that I really enjoy, and so yes, it's nice. It's just I'm taking my victory lap now.
Okay. So then the results come out and they're announced on the internet in Tennessee, right?
They are. There's the success list.
Yeah. And so tell me about that moment when you go to check the list.
Well, it was kind of funny because I had gotten to where I believed that I probably didn't pass again. I kind of got down on myself there for a little bit. And I knew when the list was going to be published. So I told myself, okay, I'm just going to swamp myself with work so that I don't think about it. It didn't work. So I went out to the internet. I kept hitting the refresh button. And I was going down the list. And there aren't many hides around Tennessee. I don't know why not. But I was going down the list and I saw Hyde, Nathan. And I was like, oh, son of a. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, maybe. And then they're right at William. I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. And it was, yeah, immediately, I work in a cube farm. And, let's just say everybody knew I passed. And I'm not one for dancing, but I busted out a groove.
Yeah,
this year.
yeah. And folks, there's really nothing less attractive than a guy our age busting out a groove.
We know that, and we do it anyway.
There's just a moment when it's got to happen. That's awesome. So then, what was your family's reaction?
Well, I called my mom, and I told her, I said, hey, Mom, is there anyone you want to sue? And she goes, what? And I said, well, if you got anybody you want to sue, I'm your guy. And she goes, oh, you didn't. And I said, I did. I passed. And then but before then, obviously, I called my wife. She was first on the speed dial, and because she had probably sacrificed, the most of anyone. And very pleased, very happy to have me back home. Anyway, we just had we've had quite a fun few weeks.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What it's such a great, and I love hearing about when people get their results, because it is such a great moment of celebration. Um, what advice would you have for people who might be retaking their exams wherever they are right now, and they're kind of in that, that feeling that you had, that anger, that disappointment, the skepticism that comes with all of the things that go around this? Because I remember at one point you said, you were tired of everyone pointing fingers and saying that bar takers were stupid people, the NCB and the law schools and everybody else. And I thought that it was poignant. Stuck with me. But what would you say to people who are feeling that right now?
Well, I would say that it's not, people aren't getting dumber. It's, and I would say don't be angry, which I've been through it and I was mad for a good solid year. But I came to realize that it just wasn't constructive. It wasn't helping. And you flat out told me that. Verbatim, matter of fact, he said, it's not helping. Bill, you gotta let that go. It's not helping. And I did. And I replaced that anger with ambition again. I realized, okay, there are people who are passing this test. And why am I not passing the test? And it's because I've got to do what works for me. And what might work for a 20-something with no job and nothing better to do than study all day is not going to work for me. And so I would say take your time, pace yourself, have good study materials, trust your gut, and practice, 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 practice. And then after you practice a little more.
But I'm excited for you and excited for your success on the exam. I just think it's great news, and I'm so glad you came on our webinar to find out, how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. It actually worked, didn't it? Oh,
it worked.
Who knew?
I know.
Any other final comments? Anything you want to share with our audience today?
It doesn't matter what your age is, you can do this, and just focus on what Jackson's advice, and the next exam will be your last.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, listen, I really appreciate you sharing your story. Congratulations. I know that you're planning to use your law degree in your current job, and so it's a great career advancement for you. And just a capstone, I think, to this whole process of studying and going back to school and being a lifelong learner. And I love that, and I love that resilience that you had. So I just want to thank you again for being with us today, and I know our audience appreciates your story and your insights. And so to all of you who've been watching and listening, I want to thank you. It's an honor to have you share your time with us, and I know that you would join me in congratulating Bill. So that's it for today. We'll see you again on our next episode. We've got more successful bar exam takers to talk with later, and bye for now.